product provided by Koei Tecmo Europe. I'm a little late on this, I know, but in my defense, Koei Tecmo put out like 5 releases in the span of 1 month. Luckily, I'm only interested in 3 of these, but I still had a lot on my plate between trying to play these games and doing various time-sensitive MK content. But finally, I'm able to come back to Dynasty Warriors Origins and say, this is not the return to form I hoped it would be. There was a lot riding on this game after the disaster that was DW9. 9 was an open world revamp that sacrificed much of the series' identity and presentation for an unpolished trend chaser that simply was not fun to play. I'm fairly certain its largely negative reception is why it lacked the usual series of spin-offs outside of an Empire's release that dropped the open world, which would have been the only thing that could make an Empire's title with 9's core gameplay at all worth experiencing. DW9 was 6 years ago. Samurai Warriors 5 released in between these and rebooted that series, keeping the gameplay the same so there'd be some fundamental identity retained, while the story and cast were overhauled. It narrowed the scope from the entire Sengoku era to just the Nobunaga years, centering its plot on Nobunaga and Mitsuhide's friendship and falling out, offering historical and hypothetical outcomes to certain events, leading up to 2 very different endings. I really enjoyed that game, and it's clear that this is the approach Origins is trying to take with the Three Kingdoms setting. However, I simply cannot find the drive to play this game anymore. To some people, you can't give your opinion on a product without getting through the entire thing, and while that standard may fly for a movie or maybe a TV show, a passive experience that usually isn't too long, with an active experience like a video game that can be dozens of hours long, no, you're just being unreasonable. And the fact that I can't finish it is the review itself. Allow me to elaborate. At the time of writing, I'm around the end of Chapter 2, just before the alliance against Dongzhuo makes its move. In the same way that SW5 took what would previously have been single battles and extended them into multi-battle arcs, this game drags out its plot with additional stages such as escorting Jiao Chan and her father, or dealing with bandits, and having our lead character meet various characters in the meantime. The game swaps the open world for a world map the player traverses, allowing them to engage in optional battles with no story beyond a generic goal, which are useful for clearing the challenges the other characters give you to boost your relationships with them, but the lack of story there does make them unfun to engage with and only necessary to fill out checklists of stuff to do and max out friendships with the likes of Zhang Jiao and Dongzhuo before they die. Throughout all this, we play as our avatar, Wanderer, who is at the centre of my lack of desire to play the big new entry in one of my favourite franchises. Wanderer is a silent protagonist through whose eyes we witness the rise of the Three Kingdoms. He is, like most aspects of 9, a pale attempt at replicating other games without an understanding of what makes those things work. This is not the first time Musou games have used this sort of character. The Samurai Warriors Chronicles games feature a silent protagonist at their centres, and I count the first of those among my favourite entries in that entire series. So what makes Wanderer so bad by comparison? Basically everything, save for that he has a personal story, but even that is a negative somehow. If we're going to centre the story on a player avatar, they should at least be customizable. Chronicles offered gender options, various customizable hair and clothing options, and each gender received a unique moveset. Wanderer gets differently coloured accents if you buy the big collector's edition. Chronicles saw the debut of the team system seen in the Hyrule Warriors, Fire Emblem Warriors, and even later Samurai Warriors games. So even with our avatar, we'd still have 3 other real characters to play as per stage, and even receive unique objectives for them in certain stages. Origins lets you choose 1 support character for key battles, but you only control them yourself during Musou Rage. You can use their weapons yourself, but it's a single charisma vacuum with the weapon selection small and generic like 6 and 9, the ones people didn't like, compared to unique weapons for everyone including, again, both genders for the avatar in Chronicles. But in terms of story, Wanderer does have one. Chronicles simply had the avatar be there for all the major battles, effectively being the window through which the player observed the events of the era, while the major players retained their historical roles. Wanderer is an amnesiac from an enigmatic clan of warriors that guide history. Oh, so Assassin's Creed, but with a dry piece of plywood filling in for an Ezio or an Altair. This kind of thing worked for Wolong Fallen Dynasty, which was absolutely one of the major inspirations for this, but it doesn't work for this series. This generic story that distracts from the people I'm here to observe just drains the life from the experience and makes me not want to play. I'm not interested in this mute, personality void nobody or his stock amnesia plot, and the main story is so dragged out and spread so thin to make a full game out of what, in earlier entries, would have been about 6 stages out of over 20, and with most stages lacking the personality you'd see in stages of old outside of the occasional neat idea like Phantom Soldiers created by hallucinogenic mist you need to track down the source of. Back in DW8, I'd have been at Kirby by now, not still dealing with Dongzhuo and Lu Bu. SW5 could do that because its story centered on real characters with unique personalities and relationships, fresh new takes on established characters that injected life into their scenes and took part in side stories that were often as compelling as the main plot, like Ieyasu and his wife and all their trials and tribulations that culminate in tragedy unless you put in the work to save them. And you could actually fucking play as them. This game is not a step in the right direction. It's not what the series needed after the disaster that was 9. It needed to be something more classic in its style, which it does do with its gameplay, I'll give it that. The new additions are fine, if unmemorable, but the core fundamentals are restored. But for the story, a mute avatar was the wrong play. We needed a focus on the charismatic leaders who would shape China's future, maybe with a fictional close friendship between Liu Bei and Cao Cao, something fresh and compelling to drive us through these battles, centering side missions on real characters to give them time to shine, and once again, letting us actually play as them! I cannot stress enough how much a large cast of playable characters is core to the series' identity, and this game gives us scraps so we can play as an OC with no personality or customizability. I'm so tired of player avatars. Player avatars just drain the life from scenes they're in. Japan loves its blank slates that the games insist are charismatic figures who draw people to them and guide everyone through their own character development, despite just sitting there and being talked at for hours on end, leaving huge holes in the conversation as their occasional responses are unvoiced to not break immersion, despite someone acting like this being the most immersion breaking thing about them. And I know KT can do better because Shez from Fire Emblem Three Hopes is one of the most enjoyable characters in that entire series. We can't change their look, but we can choose gender, and their personality makes them worth following as they assist one of the nation's big 3 rulers to victory. Hey, how about that? Wanderer doesn't even have the personality that the mute Byleth has in their facial expressions. And the voice acting, my god. Once again, we've been given a truly awful English dub with an all-new cast, featuring a selection of decent actors that I've heard do better in other things, but every line delivery is so stilted and awkward. By 8, we had a solid cast of talented actors bringing the perfect balance of camp and seriousness. At this point, I'd rather they drop the English dub entirely and just give us the Chinese. Oh wait, we didn't get that one this time. How on earth do you go downhill from 9? I simply cannot recommend this game any more than I could its predecessor. DW8 remains my go-to Dynasty Warriors experience with its massive complete story covering all 3 kingdoms, the rise of the Jin dynasty, and even the extensive Lu Bu campaign that managed to stretch out a fairly short span of time with a small central roster and actually told a good story with a solid lead. DW8 released in 2013. And the series has yet to produce a mainline entry even half as good in the 12 years since. I can't play this game anymore. I'm moving on to Warriors Abyss. Look out for that review in the hopefully near future. I only pray that this one will bring back some of the joy I used to feel playing this series, even if it's a completely different genre. If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then make sure to share it with your enemies so they can suffer along with you. Today's recommended video is Dynasty Warriors Origins is Almost Too Good by Chris Gildart, to provide a different take on the game that might align more with your taste than mine does.